The mystery of the Green Children of Woolpit. In the heart of medieval England, where superstition and faith intertwined with the rhythms of the land, a mystery emerged that has endured through centuries of retelling. It was the 12th century, during the reign of King Stephen, or perhaps the early years of Henry II, when the small village of Woolpit in Suffolk became the stage for one of the strangest tales in English folklore. The story begins not with knights or kings, nor with war or conquest, but with two children, an ordinary brother and sister, yet entirely extraordinary. For their skin, as the chroniclers recorded, was not the pale hue of English villagers, but a shade of green, a verdant tint that set them apart as beings both human and not. They spoke no recognizable language, wore clothing fashioned of unknown fabric, and seemed to have stepped into Woolpit from another world. The villagers who first saw them were struck with wonder, suspicion, and even fear. For in those days, when omens were read in the flight of birds, and illnesses were blamed on curses or the wrath of saints, the sudden appearance of such strange children could only mean one thing: a mystery of divine, or perhaps diabolical, origin. This is the story of the Green Children of Woolpit, a tale preserved by medieval chroniclers like Ralph of Coggeshall and William of Newburgh, a tale that has inspired centuries of speculation. Were they lost travelers from another land, survivors of some hidden community, or visitors from a realm not of this earth? Tonight, we will walk the cobbled paths of Woolpit, hear the whispers of monks and peasants, and journey into the theories that surround these enigmatic figures. As you listen, ask yourself, who were these children really, and why did their mystery never fade, even after 900 years? England in the 12th century was a land of turbulence. The Norman conquest of 1066 had reshaped the culture and language of the kingdom. By the mid-1100s, villages like Woolpit lived under the shadow of feudal lords, their people bound to the land, tilling fields of wheat and barley under the watchful eye of the church. Woolpit itself, whose name derives from wolf pits, deep traps dug to capture wolves that threatened livestock, was a quiet rural settlement. But quiet though it was, it would soon be remembered not for wolves, but for children whose skin gleamed green under the sun. The tale is not a single account, but a woven tapestry of retellings. Ralph of Coggeshall, an abbot writing in Essex, and William of Newburgh, a historian of Yorkshire, both preserved versions of the children's story. Their writings differ in detail, yet align in the essentials. Two children appeared. They were green. They spoke no English. They ate only raw beans at first. And though the boy died, the girl survived, learned the language, and told of a land called St. Martin's. But before we reach her testimony, we must linger in the time and place where the story began, to feel the soil of Woolpit beneath our feet, to see the villagers as they worked in the fields, to imagine their awe when, at harvest's end, these peculiar children emerged from the edges of the known world. It was harvest time in Woolpit. The villagers were busy in the fields, scythes slicing through golden stalks of wheat, oxen pulling heavy carts, the air filled with the earthy scent of freshly cut grain. Life in the 12th century was harsh, but its rhythms were steady. Work, prayer, and survival defined each day. Yet on this day, something would disturb the order of things, something so strange that it would echo through the centuries. As the villagers worked near the wolf pits from which the village took its name, they noticed movement at the edge of the fields. Two small figures stumbled into view, their steps hesitant, their eyes wide with fear. At first, the reapers thought they were simply lost children, perhaps from a neighboring hamlet. But as the figures drew closer, the truth revealed itself. The children's skin was not the pale hue of English peasants, but a shimmering green. Their hair was light, their faces thin, their clothing woven from a fabric unknown to any weaver in Suffolk. Gasps and whispers spread among the workers. Some crossed themselves in fear, muttering prayers against witchcraft or curses. Others believed they were fey children, born of the hidden folk who dwelled in the unseen places of the land. The boy and girl seemed frightened, clinging to one another, speaking in a tongue no villager could recognize. Their words were musical yet alien, unlike French, Latin, or the rough English spoken in Suffolk. They gestured with desperation, but their meaning was lost. The villagers offered food, bread, cheese, apples, but the children recoiled. They refused everything, until at last someone brought fresh-picked green beans from a field. The children seized them eagerly, tearing into the raw pods as though they had not eaten for days. The villagers knew they could not leave these strange beings in the fields. So they were taken into the heart of Woolpit, to the home of Sir Richard de Conn, a local knight. There, the mystery deepened. In time, the boy would fall into illness and die, unable to adjust to his new world. But the girl, though shaken, would survive. She would learn English, abandon her green hue, and tell a story more incredible than anyone could imagine. But before that testimony, before her words revealed the name of her homeland, there was only confusion, awe, and fear. The first sighting of the Green Children, a moment that would mark Woolpit forever. In Sir Richard de Conn's household, the villagers watched the two strange children with curiosity and suspicion. The boy and girl huddled together, whispering in their unknown tongue. Their voices carried a soft rhythm, a cadence like flowing water, yet no priest or scholar could decipher a single word. The priests who visited were baffled. Some speculated it was a form of ancient Latin. Others suggested it was the speech of demons, or perhaps the tongue of angels themselves. Yet no comparison could unlock its meaning. To the villagers, the children's language was simply otherworldly. Food was offered daily. The kitchens of the manor served thick bread, roasted meat, cheese, and milk, but the children pushed it away with trembling hands. Their eyes filled with hunger, yet they refused all. Only when raw green beans were brought forth did their desperation reveal itself. They devoured them, bean after bean, as if they were the only nourishment they had ever known. In time, with much patience, the villagers learned that the children would eat beans when they were freshly plucked from the stalk. Cooked beans, boiled or roasted, were rejected. They sought only the living pods, raw and crisp, still full of green life. This peculiarity deepened the mystery. What land raised children who survived only on raw beans? Was it a hidden village in the fens? A faraway country across the sea? Or was it some strange realm beneath the earth itself? The boy grew weak despite the villagers' care. His small frame thinned further, and though he clung to his sister's hand, he seemed unable to adjust to the food and air of this world. He sickened and, before long, passed away, his body buried quietly in Woolpit soil. The girl, however, endured. Slowly, she began to eat other foods. Slowly, her green hue faded, and slowly, the strange tongue gave way to the words of England. But though she would one day tell her story, in these first years she was a living enigma, a creature half of Woolpit, half of a land unknown. After her brother's passing, the green girl became the sole bearer of the mystery. Alone, yet determined to survive, she remained in Sir Richard de Conn's household, under the care of the villagers who had taken her in. At first, grief weighed heavily upon her. The boy had been her only companion, the only one who spoke her language, the only anchor from the world she had known. Yet even as sorrow shadowed her, she began to change. Each day, the villagers encouraged her to try new foods. At first, she resisted, clinging only to raw beans. But hunger eventually persuaded her to taste bread, then milk, then roasted meat. Slowly, she accepted more, until her diet was no longer so strange. And with this transformation came another. The green hue of her skin began to fade. Where once she had shone like a figure of spring, her complexion softened into the ordinary tones of Woolpit's villagers. Even more astonishing was her progress with language. Surrounded by English words, she absorbed them with a child's ease. At first, she repeated them hesitantly, forming sounds foreign to her tongue. But in time, sentences came. Her thoughts could cross the barrier that had once made her alien. And when she finally spoke in full, the villagers listened with awe. For though her green skin had faded, and though she now dressed in the simple garments of Suffolk, her story was not of this world. She told of a place called the land of St. Martin, a land not marked on any map, a land where the sun never shone in full brilliance, where twilight ruled, and everything grew in shades of dim light. The villagers leaned closer, struggling to understand. What was this land of St. Martin? Where did it lie? Was it across the seas, beneath the earth, or in a realm that no man of Suffolk could ever walk? Her testimony would forever blur the line between folklore and reality. But before we uncover her words, we must see how she lived in Woolpit, no longer a creature of another world, but not yet fully one of this. She worked among the villagers, helped in the kitchens, walked the fields. Yet wherever she went, whispers followed her, for none could forget that once she had been green. And though she had adapted, though she laughed, though she lived, her eyes sometimes turned toward the horizon with a sorrow that spoke of exile. She belonged, and yet did not belong. She was both Woolpit's child and forever a child of somewhere else. As the girl grew into her place in Woolpit, the question of her origin lingered like a shadow over every conversation. Who was she? Where had she come from? And what meaning did her presence hold? The villagers, steeped in folklore, turned to the stories of the hidden folk. In Suffolk, as in much of England, there were tales of fairies, beings who dwelled in hollow hills, who lured children into their twilight lands, who walked the border between the human and the otherworldly. Some whispered that the Green Children were changelings, exchanged by fairies for human infants. Their strange diet, their alien speech, and their luminous green skin seemed proof enough. Others spoke of purgatory or a land beneath the earth. For had not the girl herself described a world where the light was dim, where the sun never shone bright, where twilight was everlasting? Perhaps, they said, she had come from the very edge of the afterlife. The church had long taught of souls in waiting, and the idea that children had wandered from that shadow realm seemed to fit. But there were still other voices, those who thought in terms of land and distance, rather than spirit and myth. They imagined a hidden country, cut off from England by rivers, mountains, or forests, where people lived differently, spoke differently, and perhaps even bore the marks of the green earth upon their skin. The chroniclers who preserved the tale offered their own theories. William of Newburgh, writing from Yorkshire, suggested that the children had come from an underground world, a realm vast and unseen, with its own people and customs, a civilization just beneath the surface of our own. Ralph of Coggeshall, closer to the region, echoed the strange testimony of the girl, but could not say whether it was truth or allegory. Centuries later, Others would propose explanations cloaked in science. Perhaps the green hue was the result of malnutrition, chlorosis, caused by lack of iron in their diet. Perhaps they were Flemish orphans, refugees from a nearby battle, who wandered into Woolpit by chance, confused and starving. Yet such theories, though neat, failed to capture the haunting strangeness of the tale. For even if their skin could be explained, and even if their language was forgotten dialect, what their testimony? What the land of Saint Martin, where twilight reigned and beans grew in abundance? What of their sudden appearance, in a pit meant to trap wolves, as though they had emerged from the very earth itself? Theories multiplied, yet none prevailed. The children remained what they had always been, enigmas, tokens of a world that brushed against ours only once, then withdrew forever. In medieval England, every unusual event was viewed through the lens of faith. A falling star could be a divine sign, a poor harvest the punishment of sin, and the birth of a malformed animal an omen of judgment. The sudden arrival of two green-skinned children was therefore not merely a curiosity. It was a message, though its meaning was uncertain. Priests and monks traveled to Woolpit to see the strange children with their own eyes. Chroniclers recorded their testimonies, not with the neutrality of modern science, but with the concern of men who sought signs of God's will. Some claimed the children were proof of the vastness of God's creation, beings from distant lands, fashioned differently, yet still bearing souls like any other human. Their survival in Woolpit showed that Christianity's reach could extend even to the strangest corners of the world. Others whispered darker things. Their green skin, they said, could signify sin or the mark of envy. In Christian tradition, green was often the color of both nature and corruption. Were these children a warning against human pride? A symbol of souls caught between salvation and damnation? And then there was the matter of their appearance near the wolf pits. Wolves, in Scripture, were symbols of danger and the devil, predators of the flock. That such children had emerged from the very place designed to trap wolves seemed no coincidence. Some believed it to be a divine allegory, the innocent rescued from the jaws of sin, pulled out of darkness into the light of Christian truth. When the girl's green hue faded after baptism and nourishment, priests proclaimed it a miracle, a physical sign of conversion. From strangeness into humanity, from otherness into the community of God's people. Her transformation was read as a parable, her survival a testimony of faith. Yet questions remained. Why had her brother perished? Was it punishment? Was it a lesson in mortality? Or did it signify that not all could survive the crossing from one world to another? The villagers listened, prayed, and debated. To them, the green children were no mere curiosity. They were a riddle written by God Himself upon the canvas of Woolpit, and centuries later, their symbolic power would still trouble the minds of the faithful. At last, when she had learned enough English to speak fluently, the green girl told her story. Her voice carried not only words, but the weight of a lost world. She said that she and her brother came from a place they called the land of Saint Martin. It was not a land of bright sunlight, nor of complete night. Instead, it was a twilight realm where the light was always dim, as though the sun never rose above the horizon. Everything there was washed in shades of dusk and green shadow. In her world, all things grew in abundance. The people lived much as the villagers of Woolpit did, tending fields, herding animals, and dwelling in cottages. But they were different too, set apart by their green hue, nourished by foods unfamiliar to the English, and guided by the reverence of Saint Martin, a figure of holiness in their land. The girl recalled that one day, while she and her brother tended their father's flock, they heard the sound of bells. Curious, they followed the sound, wandering through paths unknown, until suddenly they found themselves inside a cavern. The ground was uneven, the air damp and strange. They walked for what felt like hours, following the echoes of those bells, until a dazzling brightness overwhelmed them. Blinded by a light far stronger than anything in their twilight land, they stumbled forward and fell into the wolf pits of Woolpit. To the villagers, her testimony was astounding. A hidden world beneath theirs, reached by caverns where the sun never shone. Could such a place truly exist? Or was her memory shaped by dreams, grief, and confusion? Yet the girl insisted. Her homeland was real. The land of St. Martin was as true as Woolpit itself, though separated by a veil that few could ever cross. Her brother's death remained a wound in her story, a reminder that their crossing was not meant for both of them. But she, the survivor, carried her people's memory into this new world. And so, the tale of the Green Children was no longer only about strange skin and foreign tongues. It became the tale of a lost world, glimpsed only once, through the eyes of a child who spoke of twilight and bells, of caverns and miracles. Centuries passed, yet the story of the Green Children of Woolpit was never forgotten. Chroniclers preserved it, ballads hinted at it, and whispers of it lived on in folklore. But as time moved into the age of reason, scholars and scientists began to search for explanations grounded not in fairy tales or miracles, but in logic, medicine, and history. One of the most common theories pointed to malnutrition. Physicians suggested that the children's green skin may have been caused by chlorosis, a type of anemia linked to iron deficiency. In this condition, the skin can take on a pale greenish tint. Once the girl adapted to a proper diet, bread, milk, meat, the green faded, supporting this idea. But chlorosis alone cannot explain the strange language they spoke, nor their refusal to eat anything but raw beans at first. Another theory proposed that the children were Flemish immigrants. In the 12th century, many Flemish settlers lived in eastern England. Some villages were destroyed during conflicts, leaving orphans who may have wandered lost and confused. Their clothing may have seemed strange because it came from another culture, and their foreign tongue might have been a dialect unknown to Suffolk villagers. Yet this too has weaknesses. Flemish children would not likely describe their homeland as a twilight world, nor would their skin turn green. Still others suggested a more geographical explanation, that the children had come from a nearby but isolated community, hidden in the marshes or forests. Their journey through underground passages could have been a memory of wandering through dense woods or caves, magnified in the child's mind. But even the most practical explanations cannot fully erase the mystery. Why would they only eat beans? Why did their story of a twilight land sound so otherworldly? And so, modern scholars stand divided. Some argue the tale is pure folklore, a moral story dressed as history. Others insist it contains a kernel of truth, real children, real events, distorted over time. Even science admits that not every detail can be accounted for. The Green Children hover between worlds, history and legend, fact and fable, reality and dream. And perhaps that is why their story endures. Not because it can be solved, but because it resists solution. And so, after nearly 9 centuries, the mystery of the Green Children of Woolpit remains unsolved. If you travel today to the quiet village of Woolpit in Suffolk, you will still find traces of the story. The village green, the ancient church of St. Mary, and the hollowed earth of the old wolf pits all whisper of that day in the 12th century when two children emerged, skin green, voices strange, fate uncertain. The villagers who first saw them could never have known that their encounter would echo through time, capturing the imaginations of poets, historians, and dreamers for generations. Some say it is only folklore, a cautionary tale of outsiders and belonging. Others say it hides the memory of a real tragedy, lost children, famine, and survival. And some dare to believe the girl's words, that there truly is another world not far from our own, where twilight reigns eternal and bells guide the lost. But perhaps the meaning of the story is not in solving it, but in living with it. Mysteries such as this remind us that the past is not a closed book, but a living echo. They invite us to wonder, to question, to accept that some truths may forever remain beyond our reach. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine the twilight fields of St. Martin's Land. Imagine the sound of bells drawing you through caverns toward a brighter light. Imagine, for a moment, being a stranger in a world that does not understand you, hungering for belonging, yet carrying the memory of a place no one else has ever seen. The Green Children of Woolpit remain with us not because we understand them, but because we do not. They are eternal wanderers between fact and legend, between history and dream. And perhaps that is where their true power lies. The mystery endures,